He was a legend, a ghost, a phantom of the American frontier who had eluded lawmen for 16 years. They called him the Robin Hood of Missouri, a Confederate hero fighting a lonely war against the banks and railroads that had stolen the soul of the West. But on a quiet spring morning in 1882, the myth of Jesse James would come to a sudden and brutal end, not at the hands of a sheriff's posse, but from the one place he never saw it coming, from a friend, inside his own home, for the price of a few $1,000s and a lifetime of infamy. Remember to comment, like, share and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of the Calendar of Crime, before you carry on with the story. By April 1882, the once mighty James Younger gang was a shadow of its former self, decimated by the disastrous Northfield, Minnesota raid years earlier. Jesse, now living in St. Joseph, Missouri, under the alias Thomas Howard, was a man haunted by his past and paranoid about his future. He was 34 years old, a husband and a father of two, trying to piece together a new gang for one last big score that would let him and his family disappear for good. He had gathered a small, unproven crew around him, including two brothers, Charlie and Robert Ford. Robert, the younger of the two, was just 20 years old and had grown up idolizing Jesse, devouring the dime novels that painted him as a folk hero. To now be in the presence of his idol, to be part of his gang, was a dream come true. Or so it seemed. What Jesse didn't know was that his new recruits were not as loyal as they appeared. Months earlier, Robert Ford had made a secret deal with Missouri's governor, Thomas T. Crittenden. The governor, tired of the embarrassment Jesse James had become to his state, had placed a staggering $10,000 bounty on the outlaw's head, a fortune in those days. The offer was simple: bring in Jesse James, dead or alive, and the money, along with a full pardon for any past crimes, was theirs. For Bob Ford, the hero worship he once felt had curdled into a toxic mix of fear and ambition. He was terrified of Jesse's violent, unpredictable temper, and seduced by the thought of the fame and fortune that would come from being the man who finally brought down the legendary outlaw. The morning of April 3rd began like any other in the modest house on Lafayette Street. The weather was unseasonably warm, and Jesse, feeling the heat, made a fateful decision. For the first time in memory, he removed his gun belt, with its 2 Colt .45 revolvers, and tossed it on the bed. He was at home, with his wife and children, and his 2 trusted friends. What was there to fear? As the Ford brothers watched, Jesse's attention was drawn to a framed picture on the wall. It was dusty, or perhaps hanging crooked, a small domestic detail in a life filled with chaos. He grabbed a chair, stepping up to adjust it, his back turned to the room. In that moment, the world seemed to slow down. For Robert Ford, this was the chance he had been waiting for, the moment he had rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times. With his heart pounding in his chest, he silently drew the .44 Smith & Wesson revolver he had been given as a gift from Jesse himself. Charlie Ford, his brother, stood frozen, a silent accomplice to the betrayal. As Jesse reached up to wipe the dust from the picture, a single gunshot shattered the morning quiet. The bullet struck Jesse in the back of the head, just below the right ear, killing him instantly. He tumbled from the chair and fell to the floor, the legend of Jesse James ending not in a blaze of glory, but in a quiet act of treachery. The Fords didn't run. They immediately surrendered to the authorities, confessing to the murder and expecting to be hailed as heroes. They were arrested, charged, and in a swift legal process, sentenced to hang. But just as he had promised, Governor Crittenden issued a full pardon within hours. However, the fame they received was not what they had envisioned. Instead of being celebrated, they were reviled. Robert Ford, the man who shot Jesse James, was forever branded a coward, a traitor who had murdered his friend for money. He spent the rest of his short life drifting, trying to cash in on his notoriety by reenacting the murder on stage, only to be met with jeers and threats. 10 years later, his own life would end in violence, shot down in a Colorado saloon by a man seeking to avenge the death of the outlaw. Jesse James, the ruthless killer, had been transformed in death into a martyr, his tombstone famously declaring he was murdered by a traitor and a coward whose name is not worthy to appear here. Thanks for watching. Please comment, share, like and subscribe for future episodes from the Calendar of Crime.